Welcome everyone. It has been wonderful seeing so many people diving into this wonderful game. As people have been picking it up, we have been seeing a lot of questions being asked about the rules, however, and wanted to share some answers. Now, rulings have come from a variety of places, but Musha Report has done their best to compile them, so definitely make sure to check them out in the link in the description below. Now, to start things off, we do have some general rules to cover that are going to be able to answer probably about 90% of your questions when it comes down to how to rule a particular interaction. And these are, first off, that the active player resolves first. So anytime two things are happening at the same time, your active player is going to resolve, and then the inactive player is going to resolve. Active player is the person whose turn it is currently. If you're playing multiplayer, then the resolution order goes from left around the table from the active player. So simultaneous effects are resolved in the order of the player's choosing. So anytime two effects trigger at the exact same time, then whoever's triggering those effects is going to get to choose what order those effects resolve in. And then finally, all effects must resolve before progressing the game state. That's going to come into play mostly once we get into challenging a little bit later on. Now, to answer a big question that we see coming up a lot, what can I do on my opponent's turn? The answer is essentially nothing. You cannot play any cards on your opponent's turn. You cannot actively trigger any effects. What you can do is resolve triggers, plan out your next turn, and ponder on why people are so afraid of pineapple on pizza. It's a good question. Next up, we have drying. So we've seen a lot of new players coming in thinking that drying is something that it's not. Here's how drying works. Cards are going to enter play ready, not exerted, which means they cannot be challenged by your opponent. Characters must dry. Items do not. So when drying, a drying character may not exert itself. So it may not challenge, it may not quest, it may not sing, it may not exert itself for an ability. Items do not have this problem. As soon as an item is played, it can be used in whatever manner that the item allows. And then finally, drying characters may be chosen for effects. The only thing that drying affects is what the active player can do with it the turn it is played. So yes, your opponent can Dragonfire your Mad Hatter that you just played. Alright, similarly covering basic game mechanics, we have inking. So inked cards are not public information, and neither player may look at their inkwell. So if a card is inked from the top of the deck, like with One Jump Ahead or Mickey Detective, it is not revealed to either player. No one knows what that card is. Similarly, some more specific inking questions. Bell stacks. So if you have 4 bells on your board, yes, you can ink 5 cards that turn. But Bell does follow normal inking rules. She just gives you the ability to ink again, while Quill does not need to be revealed and can ink uninkable cards because it specifies any, and it goes straight into the inkwell face down, so your opponent never has the opportunity to see it. You do not have to reveal. So hopefully that covers our inking questions. When you play an ink, it comes into play readied, so you can use it immediately unless specified otherwise by an ability. And no, you don't have to pay ink costs again in order to challenge or quest or do anything. Once you play something, you've played it. You don't have any other costs unless it has a triggered ability that specifies a cost. Shifting. Lots of questions on shifting. Totally understandable at the beginning of the game before we really had rules and stuff. We had no idea how shifting worked. So shifting. While in play, a shifted character replaces the cards beneath and counts as only one character. A shifted character inherits the status of the previous character, and when a shifted character leaves play, all cards follow the leader. So, what this means, for the first part, if you challenge and banish a shifted character, and your character has a on banish trigger, like say Aladdin, it will only trigger once because that character is just one character. A shifted character inherits the status of the previous character, so if Jasper has puppy napped your Stitch new dog, and you shift into Rockstar Stitch, you may not quest, because it is still not able to quest because it has inherited that status. It also inherits damage, and it inherits whether the card is dry or not. So if the shifted onto card is dry, then you may immediately challenge quest or what have you. When a shifted character leaves play, all cards follow the leader. So When a shifted character is banished, all the cards go to the discard. When it is returned to hand, all the cards go to your hand. If it is inked through Let It Go or Hades, all the cards turn into ink, and they are all individual cards, so they all count as individual ink. So your opponent will be getting at least 2 ink if you let it go a shifted character. Next up, we have challenging. This is one of the more complicated aspects because challenging there's a state aspect of it and there's a timing aspect of it. So we're going to jump through what the basic timing in Lorcana looks like right now. There are some spots for some additional trigger resolutions that we have seen in other games, but we haven't seen in Lorcana yet, so I have left them out. First, you would declare your challenge target. Then you would exert your character. Then you would resolve any on or while challenge effects. So this is when things like Challenger or Flynn Rider or Mad Hatter would trigger. Then you resolve your damage. Then you would banish your characters. Then you resolve any on-banish effects. Yes, things like Mulan, Aladdin, Teika, if they are banished themselves, they still trigger because they saw a character be banished. And then the challenge ends. Now, what that means is, the big question you get asked a lot is, would Marshmallow or Brooms or Facilier, anything that bounces back to hand after being banished in a challenge, get bounced by something like Cheshire Cat or Cusco? The answer is yes, because you have to resolve all of your on-banish effects before the game state changes. So all of those effects get resolved while the characters are still in a challenge. Each of the characters in a challenge basically receive a status of in a challenge for both characters, and then the one that is doing the challenging would be challenging or the challenger, and then the one being challenged gains the status of challenged or challengee, and that is what's going to allow you to determine whether effects trigger or not. If, for example, you have a giant fairy Tinkerbell who banishes something in a challenge and then deals 2 damage to a broom while Mickey is on the board, the broom does not return to hand because it was banished, but not while in a challenge. The other characters were in a challenge. It was not. Hopefully that answers all of your challenging questions, and if you have any more, please leave a comment, and I will do my best to answer them for you. Next up, we have on play. So this is where things get a little interesting. So there's a couple of different on play triggers. So what that means is whenever something is played, something triggers. So sometimes the card itself has an on-play trigger. Sometimes other cards have triggers that respond to something being played, such as Coconut Baskets, Rockstar Stitch, or Dr. Facilier, the one that responds to songs. So the way that works out is songs must fully resolve before they are counted as played. That's because they don't have an on-play trigger. The song itself is the trigger, so it does not count as being played until it has resolved its effect. Characters with on-play effects trigger at the same time as other on-play effects. So, if you play a Simba Rightful Heir, I believe, the 1-cost one that draws and then discards, while a Rockstar Stitch is on the field, because both effects trigger on play, they fall under simultaneous effects, and thus you may choose in which order you would like to resolve those effects. Next up, we have cost reduction. So this is for cards like Lanterns, Dr. Facilier's cards, and Sorcerer Mickey. So cost reductions do stack. So if you have 3 Lanterns on the field and you exert all of them, the next character that you play will cost 3 less. Cost reductions do apply to shift cost. So you can shift out characters quicker if you use Lanterns or something of that effect. And cost reductions affect your ink, not the card. It affects how much you pay, not the cost of the card itself. What that means is that things like Lanterns or Facilier's cards are not going to impact cards like Just in Time or Rockstar Stitch that check for a character's cost. That cost is fixed. What we are changing is the amount of ink that it requires to pay that cost. Whenever. So you'll see this word on some effects sometimes. You see it on Dr. Facilier, the Sorcerer Mickey, and the one that most people have questions about is Steal from the Rich. So what whenever means is that this ability triggers each time the condition is met. So yes, Steal from the Rich does trigger every single time one of your character quests that turn after it is played. Just like brooms, if you had multiple of them on the field, each one would bounce back to your hand if they are banished in a challenge. Then we have readying. So a ready character can do anything a ready character can do unless they've been told they can't do something. So what that means is, some people have been asking, is if you ready a character up, can it take another action? And the answer is yes. If you have quested with a character and then you ready it with Fan the Flames, that character may then sing or challenge or exert for an ability or do anything other than questing because Fan the Flames says it can no longer quest. Aerial Who's It Collector is an exciting card because it does not provide any sort of restriction. So once Aerial is readied up, she can do whatever she wants. So she can quest and quest and quest. Finally, we have Chosen. So Chosen means that you have selected a target for something. So you can choose a character in any state unless specified otherwise. So some unless specified otherwise situations. Befuddle, you can only choose characters of cost 1 or 2. Other cards, you can only choose opposing characters. Cinderella only allows you to choose princesses. Moana, the red one, only allows you to choose a character named Teika. So unless it does not specify what your choice is, you can choose any character, whether they are drying, whether they are exerted, whether they are ready. Ward obviously specifies that they can't be chosen. So this is relevant with the Elsa Spirit of Winter. It says to exert chosen character, not chosen exerted character, which are different wordings. So regardless of whether the character you choose is already exerted or not, you can still choose that character. The exert portion of the effect may fizzle, but they have still been chosen, meaning that they will still not ready at your opponent's next turn. Similarly with Chosen, we will talk about Ward real quick. Ward does not protect versus cards that do not need to choose. Now, quick PSA, Befuddle does choose. That has been confirmed by the development team. But other cards like Be Prepared, Grab Your Swords, or the ability of Cheshire Cat or Cusco do not, and so Ward does not protect from those effects. Well, I hope that everyone has enjoyed this episode. I hope we've been able to answer some of your questions. If you have any more, please leave us some comments. Make sure to do all the things that you do on YouTube, like subscribe, bell, and share this with all your friends. All right, have a nice day.